Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the planet mattered. A podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! Welcome to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Agriculture as if the planet mattered. In these interviews, I'm talking to people who are scaling up the sector, either by increasing the influx of capital or by working on the ground to scale up the enterprises on the ground. Why regenerative agriculture? Because so many of the world's current issues come together in this subject, from drought to water scarcity, climate change, social issues, hunger, obesity, all have a connection to how we grow food and what we eat. You're going to listen to an interview with Thomas Vaassen of Land Mapp. I'm a small angel investor in their company. They're working on land right documentation for rural communities. Because to really unlock economic development, you need property rights. And what do farmers have? Land. But no farmer will ever invest in something regenerative or even sustainable if they don't have their land rights and thus a long-term perspective. So this could unlock a lot of potential development for the 500 to 600 million smallholder farmers we have in this world. And we depend on them for a lot, for our daily coffee, chocolate and tea, just to give a few examples. So welcome to Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Agriculture as if the planet mattered. I'm Koen van Seijen, the host of today. In the podcast today, I'm talking to Thomas Vaassen, co-founder and CTO of Land Mapp, a startup out of Amsterdam, the Netherlands, delivering affordable land rights documentation to rural communities. Welcome, Thomas.
Hello, Koen.
So to dive in with a personal question, why are you doing what you're doing after a comfortable, not really comfortable, but a startup life in Amsterdam? Why did you decide to work with rural communities and land rights?
Yeah, I got caught with a certain virus, I guess. And then it's hard to not do it. I think after working in the social enterprise sector for about 7 years, I put a lot of thought in what I really believe that kind of unlocks value creation, unlocks economic development. And at some point I had an insight around property rights, that those are really essential for building an economy. And once I started seeing that, looking into how does the bottom billion of this planet actually arrange their property rights, Hernando de Soto, a Peruvian economist, wrote a lot about that. And seeing that they have a big asset, which is land. So that's why I got caught in the sense of looking into land rights and understanding there's a whole range of research and people actually working on that. So it was a process, and slowly that developed into an idea of a company, a business that provides that land rights documentation through a business model, which was kind of new. So. And also in the process, I had dinner with a friend and also a colleague at the Impact Hub who'd been working also alongside for about 5 years in the global team. And I think he was also ready to make a move. So I think just things started to catch fire at some point, and that's how it got started.
And when you look at unlocking land rights, you ended up in Ghana with cocoa farmers. Can you describe the the steps and the process that made you end up there instead of basically any other place where the bottom billion is trying to secure their property rights?
Yeah, it's you know how that goes. It's you can explain it in a very rational way, but it's not. That's only when you look back. But yeah, so initially we just wanted to have trials and tests in various countries, and we did do a pilot in Albania with an NGO on farmers whose land was actually taken from them in the communist time, and then it had to be redistributed. So it was an interesting experience. Also in Indonesia, we found an interesting party that sources cocoa beans from farmers in Sumatra, was willing to work with us, and we met about 200. And in Ghana, the story was that we initially started speaking with all the experts in the field, and then several people also mentioned to us, you got to speak with a guy at Omidyar Network, whom is basically the only big impact VC that focuses particularly on this topic. So we were quite eager to speak, and after a couple of calls and meetings, he was like, yeah, you should speak with these guys in Ghana because they've tried this before in another constellation of people, and it actually stopped, but not due to market conditions. So we had a call with one of these Ghanaians who'd been doing this basically, and slowly we became to Ghana, spoke more, and slowly explored the market as if like any of the other markets that we were exploring, because we were also looking into, I think at that point, Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya. But for certain reasons, Ghana made a lot of sense. I mean, the language is good, it's English. Culture is very open to foreign, I think foreign kind of involvement, and it's safe. It's been tried and tested there. But also there's been like 15 years of land reform pushed from the World Bank top down, and that didn't deliver the results they wanted, but it did create some kind of political willingness basically, and it's kind of some framework. I think we've seen that as well in Indonesia, that it's good that there's been like a decade of top-down land reform push that at least kind of makes people aware of the situation, of the challenge, and we take it much more bottom-up. But the policies are kind of somewhat more ready for our work to be done. And so the rest is more serendipitous. I mean, we've met the people there, slowly met surveyor, land lawyer, and various experts. And then at some point it just seemed to be the best opportunity to really take it forward. Because in none of these countries we could do this ourselves, right? We're not the ones that can negotiate with chiefs one-on-one as a white guy, We're not the ones that know how to operate and navigate the surveying sector and the political sector, etc., etc. So the fact that we could bring on these Ghanaians slowly, step by step, was also a key reason.
And if you look at the process now compared to maybe when you started, can you walk us through the steps of what actually happens on the ground when you're surveying and unlocking this value, and how much of the process has changed compared to the trial you did and actually how you're running it today?
Yeah, it's a nice one. So initially, I mean, first we had the idea that was more like people actually could themselves map their land using a smartphone. Yeah, and then they would actually crowd validate that, meaning their neighbors and previous occupants, etc., would get like a notification, like, hey, Mr. Kwame has mapped his land and attests that this is his, and could you verify that? Could you verify his boundaries and his ownership type, etc.? And then if sufficient people like support it and there's no counterclaims, and the likelihood that it's actually yours could rise, and at some point could be sufficient for third parties and banks to then distribute loans or credit based on that, and slowly it becomes like a very independent repository of land claims that totally circumvents the existing government cadastres. That was like the dream and idea in the beginning. And we tested it, but it's like the farmers weren't willing to pay anything for that. They were like, yeah, but if the chief or the government doesn't authorize or sign it, and it's useless. It's so an ingrained system that they're used to, like, when certain authority signs it, then it's real. And all the other stuff is, doesn't have value to them. So we'd have to kind of let go of that one. And then in the tests, it was more like mapping. So you have a GPS device, they have like 3-meter accuracy. We built a form, like you walk around a parcel and then you ask a bunch more questions, make some photographs, fingerprints, and we did that. And that is initially, and we did in the pilot, that is sufficient for like knowing the parcel size roughly, which is interesting for all the commodity buyers, for example, and for certification purposes, for technical assistance, for various reasons that's useful, because most farmers don't know the size or they underestimate it significantly. Yeah, you can put it on a map, right? For the data, it's useful, but it's not sufficient for surveying. I mean, what you will see if you look on a map of those kinds of parcels, and some commodity buyers have done this themselves for thousands of parcels. It's not surveyor grade. Accuracies are not good enough. You see slight slivers and overlaps, and which is not allowed basically for surveying. The the data quality, integrity is not good enough. So what we end up with now is quite a sophisticated, integrated kind of hardware, software, and data management solution. Of course, you have to look for quite cheaper alternatives to the GPS devices. The surveyor grade devices are €10,000 and up, so we had to really work with kind of novel devices and kind of hack them a bit and develop software. You can have now devices about €700, and they're linked to an Android tablet that we have, and so the mapping is much more sophisticated. There's also pillaring of the different corners of the field. It takes a bit longer, and then the interview we do with the farmer takes also about 40 minutes in the village, where we have our interviewers write a whole lengthy testimony of how the parcel was acquired and about 200 questions about the legalities of it. There's a witness walking around with the farmer in the parcel to also check whether the boundaries are correct. There's a lot of biodata and household data that we collect in addition, which we could also use for other purposes. Yeah, and there's like 1,000 things more that we've found out and have kind of implemented over the months. Let's say the farmer is ill or very old, and there's a representative, and there's a process with the power of attorney to go through, for example. So once it becomes legal, that's a bit my point. Once it becomes legal and technical, it's like there's a lot of nitty-gritty details that we have to take care of. That if ever the document ends up in court and there's Land Mapp on it, that we can show the whole audit trail, like all the steps we've taken to assure that the data is correct, and that also continues after the data has been collected. It's being sent to our servers, and then in the office in Accra, the capital of Ghana, then there's the data coordinators who actually check through all that data and verify it. Sometimes has to go back to the field for checks and also clean it and make sure it's presentable. From simple things like spell checks to very important things like cross-referencing the claims, like you have a leasehold or freehold claims to the land, and that depends on your ethnicity. Those things all have to be verified. So through that, and after that, there's a whole process of having it signed. So there's about 7 or 8 signatures being appended by various authorities, and that's also like a whole logistical chain basically before it can like be sent back to the farmer. So I think that's a long story. The short one is more like initially idea that's like have farmers themselves map it through a phone, and then pivoting more towards like kind of more a simple mapping solution that any representative in the field could use, like maybe commodity buyer have a lot of officers in the field, they could then map the land, we could give them a commission and collect the data in that way, to finding out that that is not going to cut it in terms of data quality, integrity. So we have built our own team, we have built our own software and hardware solution, we have our own trainings, and our team goes out and it's like a whole professional kind of chain of activity that goes through hundreds of steps, from farmer field to office back to farmer, that we are now kind of running. So and that's been a a trial and error process.
And so when we talk about unlocking, how does this in your vision of the future, maybe not at the moment, like at this moment now, but in the near future and the longer term future, how does this unlock value for these smallholder farmers?
Yeah, so in two ways. I mean, one of them is that this is the informal sector. People are not documented. They might not even remember their birthday, right? So the only way to access them is either to visit them in person and create some kind of profile that, who are you? What does your livelihood consist of? And, what is your productive capacity? And what are your ambitions? Do you want to expand your parcel, for example, replant your cocoa trees in this case, add fertilizers? There's a lot of technical assistance and inputs are available, but they don't reach these particular farmers often. So that's the first step, like by documenting.
Because they're literally not on the map.
Yeah, they're not on the map, and they're illiterate, and they might not have a phone number yet. So just by collecting all that data and presenting, giving, next to the whole legal contract, you also get a profile about their farm and about their households. They get that in print, and we keep that in digital storage. And actually, if you talk with service providers, financial service providers, technical service providers, microinsurance, and others, that's what they're mostly interested in data about these people at a certain scale, but also with a certain quality that you can really trust it. And so what we've seen so far is that there is quite some data about farmers, but it's old, it's not maintained, and it's often incorrect. It's not verified, it's not double checked, so it's often incorrect, and the farmers are sometimes getting a bit fed up about all these questionnaires and they just give random answers. So that's the first thing I think that is needed. The second step is more that it's once they have the document, that can be considered collateral, not in the fact that these parties would take over the land if a farmer maybe defaults, or they could, but it's more a proxy or an indication that somebody has an asset and has been going through a lot of effort to actually register and secure it. That means something. That means that they value it. That probably means that it's productive. Probably means that they can have a certain repayment capacity. So that's the second big step. And then the third one is more really connectivity, and something we haven't done yet, but what we're going to pilot in the next few months is actually connecting them to mobile money providers. So actually signing them up for mobile money while we do the interview. So that from that point onwards, we have a payment relationship, which is ongoing. We could have additional contact through SMS or IVR processes where you have some option to maintain an ongoing communication, which can also be very valuable. And I think at that point, through those steps, you can unlock additional services, and through that, make the farmer and the farm more like worthy of investment. You say like ready for investment. And through that, improve their livelihoods.
And when you look at, I know it has been you're working in a startup, so it's been every day is new and different, etc. But when you look at the last year, I know a lot has happened. Can you walk us through a bit what you've been busy with, from like if you look at a year ago, which is March 2016. What has changed, and also if you look maybe ahead a year from now, what do you think will be different and will be different for Land Mapp?
Yeah, a lot. Last year, I think, about 15 months ago, my wife and I decided that we should live in Ghana for a year. So that was a big step, and I think it's been a very interesting year in that regard to really live there. And then about this week, a year ago, we did the first sales. So we found somebody in the field in Ghana that has been working for what is called a customer land secretariat, basically kind of a small office for a certain chief that to organize the land disputes and land documents in that area. And so he was willing to come on board, and we asked him to compose a team of mappers and interviewers. And then, so a year ago we started actually selling, and I built certain forms, and we just started collecting the data, collecting down payments. So farmers pay about 20% of the document they pay in down payment. So let's say 20 euros. And actually, the funny thing was the first week we did like amazing sales. It was crazy. Like 75 documents we sold, I think, in the first week. So we were like, wow, and readjusting our forecast, like this is going to go insane. And then 3 weeks after that, we sold just the same amount as the first week. So it was just like a lucky hit, funny enough. But then soon enough, I started moving there and just building the company, which if you've experienced in any, I think, African market, anything that takes like 5 minutes here, it takes a whole day there, from opening a bank account to paying a salary to buying a car and all that kind of stuff. So it's very operational, but the product development has been a lot of work, just getting the details right, because it's legal, it's just getting the details right and different for each chieftaincy, and building relationships was also quite key. So I think I've been very lucky to be able to work with these kind of couple of experienced Ghanaians. Yeah, I think from that point onwards, things started to become real. And so at some point, I think, by the end of the year, we had a team of about 30 people, 3 offices, a couple of cars, 8 motorcycles, and a lot of capital expenditure had been made, a lot of training, a lot of devices, GPS, tablets, and several thousand parcels mapped. So in a way, that's been like a bit of a roller coaster, but it also came with all these challenges. Like we had several accidents happen. We had all kinds of issues in the team, and employment issues. We had all the stuff from like power failures all the time, elections coming up where we weren't able to work for a week. Yeah, basically things breaking down all the time, and spending half my day on just getting it to work before I even had time to actually build more stuff on top of it. Yeah, so it's always hard to give like a real sense of what it's like. I mean, I was like in the field every 2 weeks, meeting with the field team, spending a couple of nights there, doing some upgrades to the systems, discussing the issues that came up with the customers, and then again back to the office, and a lot of building the data systems. And it's I think one of the interesting things is really through this process, by really selling something, is really understanding the customary land system, which is quite different than if you investigate it or research it, or even doing a donor-funded project. Of kind of by selling something, we had to negotiate with the chiefs. We had to sit down with a bunch of chiefs and then negotiate on the farmers' behalf on the signing fees, for example, or on the fact if we were allowed to work in that area. And then you really get to understand the way it works, and the way they operate and think and behave, etc. And that was really interesting to see that from so close, that this has been like a kind of, it's quite an archaic model, and it worked for maybe a couple of 100 years, and it's still in place. It's still the most influential, powerful system in the whole rural Africa, basically, through customary authority. So, and next to that, the fact how farmers think and behave, and how far removed that is from our Western way of thinking, how they make decisions. And they're our customers, so it's like to kind of empathize and really understand, not to be nice and cute, but just to try and sell more. You need to really understand their realities and the seasonality, the patterns that they have to deal with, and how they deal with money, how they deal with value, how they deal with family relationships, and all that stuff. So it's been like a crash course, basically, in that regard. And I think that's been the most valuable component, to some extent. Whether we're going to make it really successful, will be dependent on, I think, their capacity to continuously integrate and iterate on the learnings from the field, and not to be rigid, and to really be super flexible and kind of continuously being adapted in the field and from our customers. So yeah, and then by the end of the year we started delivering our first documents, and that's of course like a huge moment to really feel that we've now secured the land tenure for some of these people. And it really works because, of course, most experts have said that it totally won't work. So in that regard, it's been a breakthrough, I think, to really make it work. And now it's more to make it work at a certain scale and make it work also profitably, which is the next step.
And is that what you will be working on? I mean, if we talk again a year from now, what do you hope you have achieved? Is that the scalability, different countries, different type of documents, or is it really focused on the farm seal scale up like in Ghana as you're doing now?
Yeah, so I think it's for us is to make the whole product work. Yeah, you have this way of thinking about product development while you start with the bare bones, just only the product itself, the core value that you're promising to the customer and making that work. And I think that this year is more about the total product approach, which is the product in its context. Let's say the way you distribute it, the way you market it, the way you integrate it with other services, all the additional ways to make it flow, to make it work. So we have to improve our payment collections and spread it out over a certain period so that it aligns with the cash flows of the farmers. We're also building signature digitization options for chiefs and give them a tablet so they can review documents digitally and sign, which saves a lot of time. We are building like these SMS solutions that farmers get messages when their document is ready, and these kinds of things. And of course also maps and data solutions for all the additional stakeholders that they can actually view and see what's going on in that field and might be willing to pay for that. So there's a whole kind of approach, everything around the core product that we are working on to make sure that it's going to be even more accessible, more affordable, and more scalable. I think that's going to definitely take a lot of our time. And then the second product for residential parcels, we're going to launch it in a couple of months as well. So that's like homeowners, people with houses. They also want to secure that land that we're going to launch. It's a different, it's more peri-urban and urban, so it's a different environment. In certain ways it's easier, in certain ways there's also more competition. So let's see how that goes. I think that's for now. And then the third thing is that there's a lot of opportunity for for using this data in a lot of other ways. I think as we touched on, but particularly for credit provision, financial services, that's the most straightforward option. So we're speaking with a couple of MFIs and rural banks to collaborate. And once we visit these villages and work with these farmers, what data do we need to collect to build a simple credit profile and also have them access financial services.
And when you look at this agriculture revolution that is happening in many parts of the world, where farmers are, if they have the resources, of course, looking much more long term, trying to decrease their inputs, trying to get to certain certification, become more sustainable, etc. What do you see as a role of smallholder farmers that, of course, have a huge potential, but at the same time huge constraints because of circumstances, and may want to grow other things, but don't have maybe the financial means to make these long-term bets or long-term investments? Do you see a role for this huge group of smallholder farmers, and if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, certain crops are so far just only grown by smallholders. Certain crops don't make, you can't really do it on the plantation level so far. However, like the size of farms that they have currently, like 1 acre farms, also doesn't really make sense. So there has to be some way of changing it around. So I do think that a lot of the food provision will be done by smallholders still over the next decades. And but it needs to be more integrated with the chain, right? So I think if you see certain value chains in coffee, cocoa, tea, oil palm, and cotton, there's a lot of effort also by the traders and then also by the manufacturers to try and work on the first mile. What's the first mile? The first mile from the farmer. Certification, that was a first step, and sustainability and traceability is coming up. So there's a lot of effort being made because we all know that we're dependent on these growers, and there's some interesting work being done, for example, in Ghana, to say, well, can we combine certain plots so that we have a bigger area, so we can then collaborate with a couple of farmers together, and it will become much more affordable to apply certain inputs or to contract labor services, and to make the whole operation more efficient, because you can make these farms efficient. You can triple or quadruple the output if you farm with different practices or if you apply certain inputs. But in some way, that's not really getting off the ground. So, and one of the issues is that, like we started the conversation, there's no data, there's no knowledge, and that knowledge doesn't trickle down to the farmer level. So, in a nutshell, I would say, we're going to be dependent if we want to eat like chocolate and drink coffee and use oil palm. There's certain other crops that you could do much more, like soy. You don't need smallholders for it, but other crops. Interestingly enough, a lot of the high value crops, fruits and vegetables, we're going to be dependent on smallholders. And there's a scenario through climate change and negligence that their outputs will actually only decrease year by year. And I think we're just more in a scenario where we're trying to counter that. We're trying to keep it stable, and not yet there really to try and increase it or improve it. So I think all the effort is being made at the moment is just to try and counter the effects of different rainfall patterns that we're seeing in Ghana, or droughts that are coming up at massive scale, and that the people just they don't know how to deal with them. They've been doing this for generations in a certain way, and to adapt to a different way of farming is very challenging. So a lot of effort has to be made, and I think we hope by at least securing the tenure of the land will allow that investments can be made into it. A simple example is that if you cut down all the cocoa trees, you need to do that. You replant your trees, which are often very old. You need to replant them at some point. If you cut them down, the chief will come and say, "Oh, you cut the trees down, so I guess you're no longer interested in the parcel. I'm going to take it back." That's a default way of doing things, right? By documenting it and having it proven that it's yours, you can say, "No, it's mine, and I'm just replanting it," and so you won't have that same challenge and risk. And so it means that farmers are not afraid to replant them, which they currently are. And so in that way, investment can be made, and trees can be replanted, and a whole parcel can be regenerated and become productive again. Like, these are some of the very basic, simple constraints that we're seeing, in which the land documentation can play a role.
And if you are, let's say you're a brave and hopefully smart impact investor looking to, let's say in this case, play a role in the sustainable cocoa sector, and wanting to invest, what would be your advice?
Good.
Could also be don't do it yet. I mean, it could be too early, but
I think it's important to look at the systemic issues and pick one and try and make a dent for that particular systemic issue. Of course. From my perspective, this is the one that we're focusing on, where we see the biggest benefit to unlock all kinds of additional services. But I think it's possible, and there are definitely examples where entire areas get rejuvenated by a consortium of partners that collaborate. And so I think those are maybe the two components to look at. Is there a systemic issue you can focus on, and can you do it in collaboration with other partners? And can you do it in in an economic way. So I think at least what we've seen is that do it, do it as a business from the start. So trying to make money from the start, try and generate value from the start. Don't just put in funds as a donation, but try and do it through a generative business model. Let's say also, for example, it's a simple example, but maybe just to see that there's also trees in these cocoa farms. There's shade trees. They're important actually for the cocoa growing. They improve the cocoa production. But the shade trees by themselves, after 20, 30 years, become very valuable. They're like hardwood trees. So there's currently not a way usually that the farmer can also have tree tenure. So they can prove it's his or her trees. So again, the government official or the chief or even the neighbor might come and cut them down and just sell off the wood. And there's no way to stop them. Unless you can again prove that you've planted them, and and it's simple. You can just tag the tree with a geo tag and take a picture, etc. We could do that while we map the farm. It could be a significant source of additional revenue for the farmer. It could also incentivize them to take care of those shade trees better, and everybody wins. So, and it's just by mapping and tagging them and providing legal documentation for them. That, and there's several, even carbon trading ventures kind of focusing on that in Western Africa. And so I think you could pick one of those things. You could say that's a systemic issue. It's across the globe. We can pick a pilot area. You can collaborate with a certain number of parties. We can figure out how that works. And we could probably build a solution that can do that at scale and really benefit both the planet and those farmers and food production. That would be my advice, but I think it's up to anybody themselves to kind of see what is a topic that you really feel passionate about doing something for, and then try and give it some thoughts.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and taking the time to share it with us today. I think we'll definitely be checking in how the scale up across the value chain and maybe also other countries and other products is going to take place in the next years. And thanks again for taking the time this morning to talk.
Yeah, welcome. It was great to talk, and looking forward to catch up later, Koen.
You just listened to an interview with Thomas Vaassen of Land Mapp, talking about how to give land rights to the 500 to 600 million smallholder farmers we have in this world. I hope you enjoyed it and come back to us soon to listen to more of these interviews.
If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? And what questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space? For whom is this course? You. the soil builders and investors in this space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, ag-tech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. We're going to look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soil builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.